grouping of hawks are the accipiters. And they have a long tail and short rounded wings. And see, they're not pointed like the falcons. The most common one is the sharp-shinned hawk. They're maybe the size of a blue jay or a little bit bigger. And the typical thing of an accipiter, or their pattern of flight, they flap, 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 sail, flap, 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 sail, and sometimes even from a long distance you can see up in the sky, and hopefully we will see some. You can see a hawk, and then it'll just flap, 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 and they say, oh, there's a sharp-shin. But back in here sometimes, especially when the sharp-shins are going, they kind of zip right over the top of trees, or sometimes go through the trees. The accipiters hunt for little birds, and sometimes they'll just shoot right through the woods, and evidently they are good at maneuvering through branches. A little bit bigger cousin of the sharp-shinned hawk is the Cooper's hawk. It's kind of the general shape, but it's bigger. The sharp-shinned hawks have kind of a square tail. The Cooper's hawks have a rounded tail. One of the guides mentioned that if you see an accipiter and it looks like it's a T, a shape of a T, most likely it's a sharp-shinned hawk. But if it's the shape of a cross with more head showing, then it's a Cooper's hawk. Another accipiter that comes down in the wintertime sometimes is the goshawk, and it's much bigger, and they're exciting to see. They don't come as often as some of the other hawks. Sometimes they go in like 10-year cycles or so of having a bunch come down. But, okay. Another group, the most common type hawk probably that we see is the red-tailed hawk, and it's in the group called the buteos, and they have kind of long, bulky wings and a tail, and they're the champions of just soaring along. The adults have the red tail, which sometimes if they're even up high, you can, the underside of the red tail just jumps out. The immatures do not have a red tail, but they're the general shape. And red tails, pretty much, if you drive around and you see a big hawk on a power pole, most likely it's a red tail. In the wintertime, a rough-legged hawk, they come down from up, they nest up north, and they come down and spend the winter. So sometimes there's a lot of rough-legs along. Another of the buteos I mentioned before is the broad-winged hawk, and they're smaller than the red tail, and they're a forest bird. They nest in the forest and hunt in the forest. And they're the ones that have this spectacular flight in the fall. This is about the time they're all shooting down to Texas, and then they'll go through Mexico. There's a hawk watch place in Mexico that people can bird on top of the roof there, and they might see 1 million hawks that go through there in a season. and the broad-winged hawks, they're on their way down to South America to spend our winter before they come back. Another hawk that we have is of a buteo is the Swainson's hawk, which these ladies would like to see, and I would too. And especially if you go west of the Missouri River, you have a better chance to see Swainson's hawk, probably more Swainsons than you do red tails. But there evidently are probably, well, the Swainson's hawks have nested in Iowa, and probably a number of them nest up in Canada. So sometimes we have Swainson's hawks here in Marshall County and in the spring or the fall. And Swainson's hawk is another that kind of about this time, they're all shooting down to go down to South America. So we hope we can have some of those.
How far down into South America would they go?
I can't remember, to tell you the truth. I think some of them go to Argentina. You remember?
No, I don't know either. There are some hawks that go down to Argentina. Turkey vultures certainly go a long way south. And they stay all year too.
Yeah.
But Mexico, and, Central America countries, Belize.
But a lot of these hawks have just amazing migrations. One thing with hawk watching is a lot of what we're dealing with is silhouettes. So sometimes, especially with nice sun, you can see good colors on them, but lots of times it's just silhouettes that you have. And so one of the real common things that's happening or coming is the turkey vulture. And they are big. They're the size of an eagle. And if you see, even from a long distance, turkey vultures, well, bald eagles are generally, their wings are flat. Not always, but generally they're flat. And turkey vultures, they're up in a dihedral, like in a V. And you can see turkey vultures from a long ways away, and they're kind of rocking back and forth. If they're in V, rocking back and forth, that's a turkey vulture. Another one that has been seen in Iowa, but not by me, is the black vulture, which a number of us would love to see, and why not here? They're more southern United States and eastern United States, but a few have been seen here. Okay. I will skip this one for a minute and go down to bald eagles. Probably anyone if you see an adult bald eagle, even from a distance, you see that white head and white tail, there's no doubt about it. But the immatures, they have all sorts of different variations that they can show. And this is an immature bald eagle with a lot of white under its wings. And it takes about 5 years before immature becomes an adult with the white head and white tail. And if an eagle has white kind of by its wings, it's an immature bald, by its body, excuse me, it's an immature bald eagle. The immature has white at its tail there, and a dark band on its tail, and then it's got this big patches of white in its wings. And boy, if you can see that, that's really a good identifier. Adult golden eagles, generally they're just they look dark. There's a difference in the size of the head projection. The bald eagles have a big head that sticks out, and a golden eagle, his head doesn't stick out as much. If you happen to see them, both the golden eagles and the bald eagles have a golden sheen on the back of their head at all ages. So if you happen to see that, that can help. Another bird that comes through Iowa in the spring and the fall is the osprey, and they're as big as an eagle. Here's a couple ospreys of the top there. And they are big. And lots of times they fly with a crook in their wing. One of the hawk watchers says, if you see a hawk that looks like a gull, it is an osprey. But they show a lot of white and dark underneath. And I imagine there's still some around, probably up at Pine Lake and some of the other lakes till the cold weather comes in. Another species that we have, and it's not as big, is the northern harrier. It used to be called the marsh hawk quite a long time ago. And they have a long tail. A lot of times they're up high, and it's a different look than what you see them. Lots of times flying low over the grass looking for a mouse. And they have a long tail with a big white rump. And if you happen to see that, that's really identifies them quite well. Okay, here, we'll go back to eagles here for a minute. On the top here is an immature bald eagle and adult bald eagle. And then the bottom is immature golden eagle and adult golden eagle.
How often do you see the golden eagles compared to the bald eagles?
Oh, maybe 5 or 6 times a season, if we're lucky. And we've seen over 500 bald eagles in a season here, some years. Let's see. Another, I guess
There's,
Oh, yeah, we're actually,
okay, good.
2 of them
Oh, way out there?
way out there. They're going behind the tree for me.
Okay. If you don't see them, move over to the right. I see one of them. It's a sharp shin with a long tail. It's almost going into the leaves for me. It's soaring, kind of flap, flap, flap.
other end, Zach. Other end.
Let's see. Well, it was going into the leaves for me. Thank you. When we're hawk watching, we need wind, and the wind's kind of gone down a little bit, but hopefully there's enough that'll get things going. And sometimes further up, there's different levels of wind.
So you're talking about they fly down the river valleys?
Mm-hmm.
So when these hawks are going south for the winter, they would go from here to Iowa City?
Well, that's the big unknown. Right here, and from here down to Albion to Marshalltown, the Iowa River is pretty much straight, but then it jags and goes about straight east toward Iowa City. So we've always wondered, well, do they keep on going? Or we see a lot of pelicans sometimes in the fall. I said, well, do the pelicans go down to Iowa City, to Hawkeye Wildlife Area, or do they jump across and go to Rock Creek or to Red Rock Reservoir? I don't know. We've seen a number of bald eagles, and I'd love some others to come too today, so all of you can see them. But there's a lot of bald eagles around Iowa, and especially as it gets later and colder, there'll be a lot of bald eagles in the air. In the wintertime, if the Iowa River doesn't freeze over completely, there'll be bald eagles kind of over those open areas, especially down in the past anyway, down at Red Rock Reservoir. The water has been open, and there's maybe 150, 200 eagles that spend the winter down there.
Yeah, and in Iowa City, next to the power plant.
Yeah,
Mows
yeah.
them.
Let's see.
How old do hawks live?
I don't really know. I think some of them, a lot of birds just don't live too long. And of course, the first year of life is probably the most precarious for all the
Yeah,
birds.
Saw him.
Got another one?
Yeah, he came out and then he went behind a
Oh,
tree
okay.
again.
Okay, good.
Shoot the fleas away.
Um,
They're gonna keep the markers here. We don't
let's
have
see.
to use them.
I think, you know, they banned eagles and some birds, and some of them have lived a good long life, 20 years or more. And the small birds, the passerine birds, like robins and warblers and stuff, I think
Yeah.
generally they don't live too long. Well, maybe 2 or 3 years is probably a normal life. And I'm not even sure on that.
Oh, there's a flock of bees.
Sometimes when we're out here, and especially when there's more wind, sometimes in the course of the day, the currents that the hawks are going in will change. Maybe maybe over of the valley, but as the day goes on, it'll shift and maybe be overhead, or then they'll switch over there. So it changes sometimes. This is a beautiful sky to work with. Probably the worst sky to have is an all blue sky, because it's really hard to pick out hawks. But with kind of filtry clouds up there like that, that's just a perfect background. So I hope we can have a bunch of hawks up there.
Bring them all.
Anybody else have any questions?
Is it known if a particular hawk and its brood, do they follow the same path, or is that adjustable to them? Do they go where the food is, that type of thing, or?
In migration, you mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of cases of either a bird that's been banded, that they maybe, or has a certain condition or characteristic that will come back to maybe the very same yard for 3 years in a row or something like that. And I think hawks, there's some they'll probably come back to, where they were born. And then I imagine spring, in the spring, they don't especially come along the river valley as much as they do in the fall. They kind of go cross country more in the spring, but I don't know. I imagine they, some do it, and some just go every which direction.
Because I know there's that eagle they watch.
There's one above a tree top.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, there's a hawk over the valley. Well, pretty low, and it's just dipping even lower.
Yeah, he went down behind you. Like you're saying, I think the current is to the left of our viewing.
Yeah, okay, what I'm seeing is a turkey vulture. It's
Yeah.
kind of a slight dihedral. And I'm looking through leaves right now. It's above the treetop, but it's almost to the left, almost out of, there's out of sight for me now. Well, that's a good sign that there's something moving here. There's sometimes we're out here and it's just so slow, and then there's sometimes it's just jumping, and you never know. Sometimes when the jet planes go over, and I forget, do you know, Norm? I've heard, but sometimes when the air conditions are right, instead of the jet trails just dissipating, those two are jet trails right there, and they'll just stick there.
What was that bird?
Norm said it's a sharpshin. I didn't see it, but
It didn't look very big.
it's really exciting when sharpshins are going. Sometimes they're just zipping every which direction, high and low, and it is so much fun.
Must be little.
Probably the best thing that hawk watchers love, the best weather conditions, is having a cold front come through like tonight or tomorrow, and then the winds will shift and it'll be northwest winds the next day. I thought, oh, those are the best. Good tailwinds for the hawk. There was one time, years ago, I was at Saylorville Reservoir, and all sorts of, it probably was late September, and all sorts of things were come through. I think we saw 6 peregrines that day, and sharpies and this and that, and a Swainson's hawk, and all of a sudden the temperature dropped about 20 degrees, and that was that cold front coming through. Broadwing hawks, they have their time to go is in September, and if they have south winds, they're up. They can use those south winds and go into them and just go fine. It is. Some of the hawks, I think, maybe tack into the wind or sideways like sailboats or so, but and it is interesting with broadwings. Sometimes if you happen to see one, if you just stay on that way, sometimes there's a stream of them coming, just one after another after another. Yeah. Oh, there's way high. It's a vulture and eagle. It's a bald eagle.
White tail.
See that, kids?
Oh, yeah.
Look, I'm
See the
zooming.
white
White
head
tail,
and tail?
white head, both.
I know in hot air ballooning, I've heard you can go up on different elevations, and sometimes the wind's going north, and you go up another, and it's going south.
What year was it that they started protecting the bald eagle? Do you know?
70s? Probably the 70s.
Well, one of the biggest things with the bald eagles and the peregrines and the ospreys was the use of DDT, and because that was the thing to kill mosquitoes, and as a result, it would weaken the eggs on the bald eagles and the other birds, and when the birds would sit on them, they would crush the eggs. And so when they banned DDT, I think it might be Rachel Carson was a big crusader on stopping DDT, and I can't remember if it's the 50s or the 60s, but ever since then there's been a great recovery of bald eagles. Gary Brandenburg, the former county conservation director, has told me there's at least 6 bald eagle nests in Marshall County that he knew of this year. Almost every year there's more. The DNR kind of keeps track of bald eagle nests around the state, and I think there are over like 300 bald eagle nests in Iowa. I think there's 99 counties in Iowa, and I think it's somewhere around 89 counties or so that the bald eagles have nested in Iowa. And there's some counties that we're rich in Marshall County with the Iowa River coming through here, but some of these other counties don't have too much, and they probably have eagles nesting in them. Bald eagles need a big tree to hold the nest, and usually they add to it every year.
I suppose that the DDT issue is probably the same reason we see a lot more turkey vultures
Could be.
Yeah, I don't know, but there's certainly a lot of turkey vultures around.
We used to float the river all the time in the 70s, and it was a treat to see a turkey vulture, and now they're all over.
Yeah. Well, there's certain places like Rock Creek State Park and Pine Lake where there's a bunch of turkey vultures that spend the summer there, and you can look up and maybe see 30 or 40 of them flying around. and they kind of kettle too.
Wonder if people live in Marshalltown, if you ever noticed, especially in the evening on the water tower over by Anton School, then it's just covered with turkey vultures.
Okay. And so, some years going out West Main Street at that big
Yeah, that electric
communications place, sometimes that has a lot of them.
Highland Acres in Maine.
Yeah.
And then our dump.
So hopefully there will be more picking up here, but if any of you want to come later on in the season, I'll probably be here off and on till middle of December.
Is this where you view?
I think probably I'll switch up by the lane, by the little parking lot, up just by the lane. It's just sit in the yard chair along the lane.
Okay.
It just opens up the sky a lot more.
Yeah.